Once you have a handle on the possibilities and the limitations of the iPhone and the iPad, you can free your imagination to create a compelling user experience. But what is a compelling user experience really? Because of the ease of use and the convenience with an iPhone or iPad, and its awareness of your location and the ability to connect seamlessly to the internet from most places, you can develop a totally new kind of application, one that integrates seamlessly with what the user is doing when he or she is living in the real world. The iPad and iPhone both allow an immediacy and intimacy as it blends mobility and the power of the desktop to create a new kind of freedom. I like to use the term user experience because it implies more than a pretty user interface and nice graphics. A compelling user experience enables users to do what they need to do with a minimum of fuss and bother. But more than that, it forces you as a developer to think past a clean interface and even beyond basic convenience, such as not having to scroll through menus to do something simple. It includes meeting the expectations of the user based on the context, all the stuff going on around the user. So what makes a compelling user experience? Several factors, and I lump them into the three most important ones: interesting, useful, and plentiful content, powerful, fast, and versatile functionality, and an intuitive interface that engages the user. Interesting, useful, and plentiful content is essential. What most of the really good iPhone apps and iPad apps have in common is focus. They address a well-defined task that can be done within a time span that is appropriate for that task. The point is, if you need to look something up, you want it right now. If you're playing a game while waiting in line, you want it to be of short duration or broken up into a series of short and entertaining steps. The point is not necessarily to create a lot of content, but to create compelling content that is useful at the moment. For example, you could use the MapKit framework to not only display a map, but to display the specific content in that map that would give your app some value. You can find, for example, the Hazard Map sample app in the sample code section. It uses the MapKit framework to display USGS earthquake hazard data on top of a map. The content is streamlined and focused on the fundamental task at hand. Hazard Map is running in the simulator, and you can use the simulator to do gestures such as unpinching to zoom in and dragging to scroll, just as you would on the iPhone. And the point of this app is that although you can provide a near infinity amount of detail just to get a single task done, you don't have to. You need to extract the essence of each task, focus on the details that really make a difference. And in this case, it's earthquake data. A second factor in a compelling user experience is powerful, fast, and versatile functionality. When you're using a good app, every piece of the app is not merely important to the task, but also important to where you are in the task. For example, if you're trying to decide how to get to central London from Heathrow Airport, the app shouldn't offer detailed information about the tube until you need it. In Google Earth, for example, the functionality is in a popover for layers. In Foursquare, you check into places that appear on your screen because they're nearby. Find My iPhone is incredibly valuable for finding a lost iPhone or iPad or iPod Touch. And in GarageBand, when you're playing a guitar, the chords you see depend on the song. And in all these apps, you don't have all of the facilities of the app, but just the functions that are important to where you are in the task at hand. Another example is that an app can know not only where you are, but what direction you are heading. For example, you can use the code in the Breadcrumb sample app, which demonstrates how to draw a path using the MapKit overlay. Breadcrumb not only can use your current location and zoom into it, but can then track your location as you move. Given that much information, it should theoretically be able to predict where you're going. And by the way, these sample apps are available in the sample code section of the iOS Dev Center, and you can use code snippets from these sample code files for your own app. The third factor for a compelling user experience is an intuitive interface that engages the user. The main function of a good app should be immediately apparent and accessible to the user it's intended for. The standard interface components give cues to the user. Users know, for example, to touch buttons and select items from table views. You can't assume, though, that users are so excited about your app that they're willing to invest lots of time figuring it out. Great apps are based on the way people think and work. When you make your app a natural extension of the user's world, it makes the app much easier and more pleasant to use and learn. Your users already have a mental model that describes the task your software is enabling. Users also have their own mental models of how the device works. At the levels of both content and user interface, your app must be consistent with these models if you want to create a superb user experience. Whenever possible, model your app's objects and actions on objects and actions in the real world. For example, Voice Memos starts immediately with the microphone image placed exactly where it should be for optimal voice recording. And there's an obvious red record button. ClearTune displays what looks like a chromatic tuner for tuning acoustic instruments or vocals, which is what it is. Both are simple and elegant for those who already know something about recording or tuning an instrument. All of these are based on physical counterparts in the real world. Another example is the Metronome sample app, which looks like a real metronome. You swipe it to get it going and tap it to stop. Here I've just swiped to the right, and then I can tap it to stop. Metronome also demonstrates how to animate a rotation, interpret touch events, and display a simple application preferences view. The preferences view appears when you tap the I button. Here you can set the time signature for the metronome. Tap Done to go back. And this is a very typical utility style application, which is similar to the sample app we are going to build. Although simplicity is a definite design principle, great apps are also easily understandable to the target user. For example, the Bubble Level sample app presents a simple interface, an analog of a carpenter's level. The user interface displays in landscape mode to make it clear to the user which side of the device is the reference side. The bubble animates to reflect the tilt of the device. Arrows indicate which end of the device to raise or lower to achieve level. There is also sound feedback that lets the user know when the device is somewhat near, very near, or dead on level. There are two more important aspects of a compelling and intuitive user interface: direct manipulation and immediate feedback. The Simple Gesture Recognizer sample app shows how to implement gestures for direct manipulation with fingers. You can explore this sample app as well as another one called Touches to see how these touch events are coded. The Simple Gesture Recognizer sample app runs on the iPad simulator, and when you drag to the left, it swipes to the left if you have enabled left swipes turned on. If you disable left swipes, swiping to the left does nothing, while swiping to the right continues to work. The Touches sample app shows what happens when you touch or tap once, or tap twice, tap 3 times, and also lets you drag objects around. The Touches app has code that can be very useful for your app. Direct manipulation makes people feel more in control. On the desktop, it meant a keyboard and mouse. On the iPhone, the multi-touch interface serves the same purpose. Using fingers gives the user a more immediate sense of control without an intermediary, such as a mouse. To make this effect happen in your app, one way is to keep your on-screen objects visible while the user manipulates them, as it is in Touches. Immediate feedback keeps the users engaged. Great apps respond to every user action with visible feedback, such as highlighting a list item when the user taps it, or moving an object when the user drags it. Because of the limitations imposed by using fingers, apps need to be very forgiving. That's why you implement the undo or redo feature for those situations where the user has to enter text. The Simple Undo sample app shows how to implement undo. The code in the Root View controller displays information such as title, author, and copyright date that the user can edit by tapping Edit in the navigation bar, and then tapping the field to edit, such as book title. When editing starts, the Root View controller creates an undo manager to record changes. So we start to type something, and then to undo that, we would shake the iPhone. Since we are using a simulator, we use the Shake Gesture option in the hardware menu. The Undo Redo dialog appears with undo typing and cancel buttons. Simply tap Undo Typing to undo it. The Undo Manager in the Simple Undo sample app supports up to 3 levels of undo and redo. You can take the code from the Simple Undo sample app and apply it in your app. And this is just one of many examples where the sample apps in the sample code section can be very useful for developing your app.